The research carried out into her family tree has disclosed that many of Olivia's ancestors, including Daisy Newton, lived in the area now known as Cardiff Bay. Olivia wants to know what might have drawn her forebears to that part of the world, so she meets up there with Wales's leading historian, Dr. John Davis.
A lot of my family came to Cardiff, and I was wondering if you would know why that would be.
Well, by the 1850s, 1860s, things were getting very difficult in the rural areas, whereas the industrial areas were booming, and particularly Cardiff, because Cardiff began, of course, exporting coal on an enormous scale. So it was a magnet to people in the immediate vicinity in the Vale of Glamorgan, and indeed further afield, the speed at which it was growing. A fifth of the total trade in coal emanated from here in the later 19th century, making Cardiff by far the greatest coal port in the world. But then, of course, in the 1920s, the coal trade goes down very rapidly, and the whole dock area was more or less abandoned. Cardiff had to find other functions, and it found in particular an administrative function. And here, of course, we've got the Welsh Senate, the Welsh Parliament, the Welsh
beautiful.
Assembly.
It reminds me of the Opera House a little bit with the curves.
Well, yes, indeed, that's true.
Yes.
Cardiff Bay is a very pleasant place these days, but when Olivia's relatives settled here back in the 19th century, it was anything but. Known then as Bute Town or the Docks, it was a harsh and sometimes frightening environment in which to live.
Higgledy-piggledy, things were piled up quite suddenly. So some of the housing would have been pretty poor and, of course, crowded. And it developed a bad reputation quite quickly, indeed. Within 12 years of the opening of the dock, the local paper talks about Bute Street being overrun by boarding houses and brothels. So it wasn't an area that people wandered around with impunity.
My grandmother was a barmaid. What kind of life would that be, and what would she have been seen as in that time period?
I would have thought that a barmaid in Bute Town, in Tiger Bay indeed, would not have been considered one of the most respectable people. But I'm sure somebody of your background that they became respectable even if they weren't originally.
Well, yes, I think she married Grandpa John, who was respectable. He was a carpenter, and she took my sister to church 5 times a day on Sundays.
Know, there's nobody more reformed than a reformed rake.
She was one of those reformed people, always the worst. So she was, if she was a barmaid, she might have married Grandpa John because he was a nice, decent
upstanding
chap, you know.
chap, yeah.
That's why she was so strict.
She was so strict. I mean, she'd wash Dad's mouth out with soap if he said anything wrong.
Bad.
And yet she was probably the raunchiest woman out there. I mean, a barmaid in the docks. Can you imagine? Daisy?
Having found out lots about their grandma, Daisy Newton, Olivia and Rona are keen now to explore the ancestry of her husband, Grandpa John. He was born in a village called St Mary Hill, which lies some 20 miles west of Cardiff, and the sisters have decided to make that their next port of call. The village is tiny, just a few houses scattered around a 13th century church. But it makes quite an impression on Olivia and Rona all the same.
God, how pretty is this? Gorgeous. Love this old stone walls.
It's beautiful. I wonder how many...
Several generations of the John family lived in St Mary Hill. The sisters have been told that a memorial to some of them can be found inside the church, and they're determined to track it down.
Wow. Oh my God, it's beautiful. Beautiful. Now, someone said it's near the door, so...
Oh, really?
Let's have a look. Now, that's a Thomas, and we're not a Thomas, and that's... Oh, look, there's a Jenkin John here.
Where?
But I don't recognise Jenkin, do you?
I don't either, no.
He said all those names.
What else? William Rees, no. What's that one?
Oh, look, there's another John here. Oh. Beneath lies interred David John of this parish, who died March 24th, 1784. That was the first
one of them.
date, I think.
What does that say?
aged 21 years, and Anne, his wife, died April 1st, 1795, aged 71. David John died April 1796. This could be them.
I think it's them.
Let me take a picture. Okay, let's take a picture. You get there and I'll take it.
The memorial commemorates two people from whom they're directly descended, and it's more than 200 years old.
That's amazing.
Astounded by their discovery, the sisters linger a while in the church. Then they stroll the short distance to a nearby house, Tir Eglwys, which another of their ancestors, Thomas John, ran as a pub during the 19th century. They're keen to see what the house looks like and find out more about Thomas and his family.
That is like the church.
It's this one, eh?
Yeah.
They phoned ahead to say that they're coming, and they get a warm welcome from the house's current owner, Ray Meredith.
Hello?
Do come in.
You must be Ray?
You guessed.
Hi.
Let me you.
I'm Olivia, this is my sister Rona.
Hi, come in and the warm.
We know our relatives used to live here a long time ago, and we wondered if you could tell us something. Great, thank you.
Ray has lived in Tir Eglwys, church house in English, for 25 years, and he's done a lot of research into its history. As a result, he's able to tell Olivia and Rona quite a bit about their ancestors, the Johns.
Right, yes. And how long were they here? Do you know? Because we don't know anything about how long they were here.
I'm not sure how long they were here. I know when they left. I know that Thomas, who was your great-great-grandfather, was plying his trade as a carpenter from here up until 1861, because in 1861 he applied for a victualler's license and turned it into the Bell. I think he must have been a bit of an entrepreneur, because he exploited the St Mary Hill Fair, which was the biggest in Wales, the horse fair, which took place right opposite in the fields.
Horse fair?
Opposite, yes. It was a gypsies, horse and cattle trading fair. Really, the license was granted on the basis of the trade that would come from the horse fair, because as you've seen, it's fairly isolated. Although I said Thomas was an entrepreneur, he painted the roof, or he whitewashed the roof, so that it could be seen for miles around. So
smart,
no matter how drunk you were, you only had to stagger towards the whitewashed house.
Olivia and Rona are thrilled to hear so much about a relative of theirs who lived and died more than a century ago. As night begins to fall, they are both keenly aware that their quest to explore their Welsh ancestry still has a long way to go. But they're delighted all the same at the progress they've made so far.
Oh, this is incredible. It's just amazing. We were just in the church, and just to see the plaque to ancestors of ours that have died, it really is amazing. We'll have some great dreams tonight, I think.
We will.
Absolutely.
Great old building.
Hold on, let's see the number. There's no number on it. I like the
When
plaque.
Olivia and Rona wake up the next morning, their quest moves into overdrive.
How many numbers up here?
They head straight for St Mary Street, in the centre of Cardiff, hoping to track down a building which played a key role in the lives of two of their great-grandparents, pub owner James Newton and his wife, Elizabeth Richards. Elizabeth was a staunch Baptist, and it's the Baptist church in which she and James got married, Bethany Chapel, that the sisters are trying to find.
Can't even see a number.
There is no number on that one.
They've been told that it can still be seen today in or near St Mary Street, but they can't find it anywhere. And there's an intriguing reason why.
13, 22.
Back in the 1960s, the by-then disused chapel was purchased by the owners of Cardiff's largest department store, Howells. They didn't knock it down as you'd expect, but took a much odder course instead. They left it where it was, converting the lower half to a sales floor and leaving the top half more or less untouched.
Well, thank goodness. We need you, we're lost.
Our genealogist, Michael Churchill-Jones, is the person who told the sisters about the chapel in the first place. Now he's going to put them out of their misery by showing them where it is.